Hello, everybody. Glad to have everyone in here. I'm going to go ahead and as everyone starts coming in, I'll go ahead and start just saying hi. Christina, if you're okay with that, I'll introduce myself just so you don't have to worry about any of that bit. So y'all just saw me a few minutes ago, but for anyone who isn't familiar with who I am Alex Bird. I am a college program coordinator with California Youth Advocacy Network. I've been with CYN for a little while now, almost 2 years. And I work specifically, my primary focus is on the side of policy, adoption, implementation, and compliance, provide technical assistance across the board for all of that. So I encourage you all throughout this. I have my chat box open on my screen. So if you do have questions about what I'm talking about, feel free to type them in chat. There will also be time at the end of the, towards the end of the session for a Q&A period in which you can bring forward any other questions that you have. You can unmute yourself and ask questions at that time. Christina will also be keeping an eye on questions and everything and is available in case anything goes funky and you need a little support. I'll apologize now. My cat is very chatty today. That's why Andrea decided to put the saying hi for my cat and all that in the Bitmojis. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and hop into our conversation. So we're going to be talking in this session about campus governance. So I have basically throughout this presentation, just to give you a little bit of an outline of what we're going to be talking about today, I have a little bit of background onto what is campus governance, what that kind of looks like. And then we move into a lot of the things that are just lessons learned from you all in the field. All of the things that I have in here are things that have been conversations that I've had and my team has had with folks in the field about issues that they've run into and questions that they've had. So this is all tailored for that. And again, I highly recommend that you go ahead and put questions in the chat as you think of them, and we will answer them either throughout or at the end, depending on immediacy of the question. So yeah. So starting off with a little bit of an introduction for what campus governance really is. I'm focusing the part of the structure for this on California community colleges, but I do want to emphasize the fact that a lot of the structure for this does also have similar formats in other forms of campuses. So you can actually take everything that I'm mentioning throughout this to your work with trade and tech, with private schools, and they have similar structures. They just sometimes have slightly different names. So at the community college level, it is state law that the districts have power to govern the campus grounds, and it cannot be made as a system-wide policy like the CSUs and UCs. Like we were discussing in our general session, this is something that for community colleges, having local control is something that feels very important to the campuses. This is something that they take a lot of pride in, that they have the control over their community, and that community colleges are exactly what their names kind of entail. They are their community. So it is important to respect them at that level and to be able to work with them at that local level. A little bit more of like what that kind of looks like is the system is controlled by the Board of Governors as well as the Chancellor's Office. And from there are 72 community college districts which are controlled by the Board of Trustees. And underneath that, there is actually now 115 campuses. However, on here I mentioned 114 because there is one community college that recently opened up that is strictly online. So for the purpose of what we're talking about for on-campus structures, I put it in as the 114 community college campuses, which is governed by the president and the college councils. The smoke and tobacco free policies, when they are being formatted, can be done in a couple different ways depending on your campus. And this is something that, because it is 114 different campuses, we see that it's kind of different for a lot of the different campuses depending on what the communities prefer. So many of the smoke and tobacco free policies are determined actually at the district level. And so what a district looks like is several of the community colleges, usually like 2, 3, it could be sometimes up to 5 community colleges, all within one governing body of the district. Those district policies, if they are made at that level, will cover all of the campuses and have regulation over all of the campuses. And each district determines if the policy adoption is going to be at the power of the district or at the campus itself. And they will have a board policy that explicitly states whether or not the power is directly allocated to the district or to the campus. So that is something that can be found within their systems, and it does need to be posted. So it's just a matter of looking into the language. If it is unclear, then that is something that having a conversation and having doing the key informant interviews with people from the district and such is the way to find out how they would prefer the system to work and to have that language be created within the policy. And most districts do require campus buy-in prior to an adoption of a policy. So if you do decide to go the route of working with the district, it is important that you have buy-in from the campuses within the district, because if you go forward and you have one campus that's really gung-ho about it and another one that you've never talked to, that one that you've never talked to could either be offended by it, be not against it, anything along those lines, and it can really hinder your ability to be able to get that passed at the district level. The next thing to be important to be aware of is the way that shared governance works on the campus. So if you've never been heard of the term shared governance, it's basically the independent focused councils for staff, students, and faculty. So there are separate councils for each of these different groups, and each of them have their own designated meetings. They have the ability to vote on their own individual resolutions of support. You don't actually need unanimous support from all 3 of these groups to be able to move forward, but it is extremely helpful to have them in your corner, or at least a majority of them in your corner. And they are the ones that really have that impetus for change and can come from it can come from any of these groups. So you can start with any of these groups. If you have students that are extremely excited, you can get student council, which is the associated student body and such, to be behind you. If you have a faculty member who's really behind you, they'll really help. Staff is one of the ones that tends to be a little bit more tricky, and having them in your corner is extremely helpful. So if you can get some ambassadors from there, that is an amazing spot to start. And all of these groups are the ones that influence the college council. So there's one joint college council that then works with the president, and that council actually includes all of these different groups. So some key players on the campus level, some spots of where you can kind of figure them out and know where it is that they are, where you can spend your energy getting some attention from these groups. Staff and faculty, apologies. Staff and faculty are the ones that tend to spend longer stretches of time on their campus. So it is something that's kind of important to be aware of, and making sure that they have that ability to have the voice in this conversation, making sure that they are, I'm going to go ahead and mute all participants just because I'm hearing some background noise. There we go. Sorry about that. So the staff and faculty spend a majority of their time on the campus, which means that they actually will feel stronger about this policy than a lot of the other folks that you speak to on the in this work. And this is where you can sometimes run into issues with and barriers with the unions, which is why it is important to make sure to include folks in the conversation early on in the work. And the other part is kind of differentiating between how involved the faculty are actually interested in being, because depending on your campus, some faculty are not as concerned about that as, say, the staff would be, because the staff are the ones who are actively moving around and doing all of the work throughout the campus, and the faculty focus more on the academic side. So a lot of the times you'll run into faculty that are like, this doesn't deal with academics. I'm not concerned about it so much at the moment. So kind of just feeling out your campus, learning the people, learning how they work, that's really important for that. Students are a key factor for getting the movements to happen on campus, to get governance, the shared governance involved. If you find students that are passionate about these issues, which can sometimes come from the health science students, the pre-nursing groups, student health center groups, those students are the ones that can really be champions and really back you up and provide those stories and those aspects of really getting involved on the campus. And campus decision makers tend to especially like when issues are coming directly from their students. It's kind of and this kind of gets into one of the things later on in the lessons learned, but it is kind of that conversation of where we are coming from as off-campus partners for working with these campuses, making sure that the voices are coming from people that they're going to pay attention to, making sure that it is from within their campus. And then the last level with the key players is the college council and the president. So the college council contains the central leadership for the campus, which includes members from the student councils, members from the staff councils and the unions, the faculty senate, and are the most important decision-making body on the campus. They are the ones that really influence what the president can do. So a policy cannot pass without the signed approval from the president. However, the president will not approve something until the council has actually brought the issue forward to the board of trustees and has actually really had that discussion across. So it is really important to make sure that all those players are involved and that the issue progresses continuously throughout. And it can be, and a lot of the times, the college council and the president can actually get a little bit offended if they're not included throughout the entire process. So if you don't include them in the conversation from the time of when you first get started, so maybe doing a key informant interview of the president when you're considering the policy, sometimes it can create, because there's still politics involved. So you have to like really make sure that you build those relationships and you make those connections. And they are these campuses are their entire work. So they want to make sure and have their opinions heard and their thoughts respected. So one of the easiest ways to simplify this process is to form a task force, which I say simplify the process with a grain of salt, because forming a task force, as any of y'all who have been doing this work for a while may know, is not always the easiest thing. But one of the things that is really wonderful about having a task force and getting folks included is that this really is the foundation for having all of those different representatives at the table, having the conversation from the beginning to actually make this feel like it's part of the campus, make sure it feel like it's part of their environment, their community. And it really helps you hear from all of the different concerns that might be brought up. So if you're forming a task force, try to include some student body, student health, human resources, campus police, unions, and also the facilities. So facilities is a big one because they're the ones who would put up your signage if you get it passed. They're the ones who have to pick up the tobacco waste wherever it's being dropped. So making sure that they are included is a really key way to get a lot more of those stories that mean something to these folks. And say you get to the point where, or I guess this one is twofold. So say you get to the point where your campus is on board, they're ready to go, they want to go take that next step, and they're ready to go and talk to the district about this. Or say you are starting the other way around and you're trying to go through the district first to then get the campuses involved, and you're trying to work the top side down. The biggest things about passing policy at the district level is that it has to include all of the campuses. So I will say there is a couple of exceptions where this hasn't been the case, but it is extremely rare for this not to be the case. Districts often will not act without the support and interest from all of the campuses in the district. And this can actually usually be shown through campus, through student champions and leaders from letters of support and community engagement from the different campuses together. So having letters from multiple campuses, having one student from each campus come to talk to the Board of Trustees. These are all good ways to show that you have interest from these different campuses. The Board of Trustees are the ones that have that final say on passing of the policy. And the thing that's important to note is that every Board of Trustees has at least 1 or 2 students on the board. And that can be extremely helpful for getting those the student engagement. If you can talk to that student, if that student is interested, that's that bridge, that's that connection between the different policy points. And the other thing to keep in mind, if you're not aware with the way that community college policy works, is there's actually, every policy has 2 parts to it. So it has the board policy and the administrative procedure. The way that this works is the board policy determines what's going to happen at the district-wide level, while the administrative policy is campus to campus. So the way that works is there is a general policy that'll come across as this is 100% smoke and tobacco-free campus. Administrative policy is saying campus 1 is going to behave in this way when they're going to be enforcing, they're going to use just education for enforcing the policy, but campus 2 wants to use the fining system structure and so on and so forth. And you can really work with your campuses to find what that means to everybody. And the next part is that, again, having a task force is extremely helpful for getting this to really move forward and get campuses involved. So making sure to have somebody who is engaging from all of the different campuses. So having members from every campus that's within the district, having somebody from the district itself actually engaged in the conversation to really just give you those core key members in key advocates for this conversation. Okay. So now from there, we're going to hop into some of the lessons learned. So all of the things that I'm going to bring up here have actually been conversations, points from conversations that we've had across California. Starting off, when you're first getting started, do your research. So really look into, this one sounds like it's something like, oh, it's like everyone knows, just know what you're talking about. But what I mean is to make sure that you're really looking in, when was the last time they updated their policy? Is any of the staff the same as the last time the policy was adapted? What were the concerns that were brought up in the past? Is there anyone that you can speak to that remembers the process and were actively involved? Are they in a rural area? And are they, and be prepared for any of the arguments that might come forward with that? We hear a lot of the times concerns about fire risk for students walking off campus because there is a lot of treed areas around, and they're worried about folks smoking in the woods and causing a forest fire, and also about accessibility. So can students actually leave campus if they have to smoke? And talking about how to kind of plan for that. And in more urban areas, we tend to hear a lot of concerns about outside vendors coming in and bringing in cannabis items, or like CBD is a big issue on certain campuses where there's kind of those confusions of vendors bringing in CBD items and that not being allowed with the policy because it's still a hemp-based product, or a THC, or not THC, it's a plant-based product from that. And then also a concern about folks walking out off campus and smoking and leaving litter in people's neighborhoods. And so being prepared for those kinds of arguments, planning out what you might say for those kinds of things. And then across the board, the most common conversation you'll run into, and being prepared for the conversation as to explaining on the spot why this could they shouldn't have this be part of what's hindering them from getting that 100% smoke and tobacco free, is the designated smoking areas, because that's a big one that's coming up right now. That's a big one that a lot of folks are confused as to why we say don't have the designated smoking areas. And we were mentioning that a little bit in general session, but just in case you need a refresher, the main reasons is because of the fact that when people smoke in designated smoking areas, it actually super concentrates the amount of secondhand smoke, and will actually make that the toxins from the secondhand smoke penetrate further than if folks were just walking around and smoking independently, because it clings tighter and it spreads wider. We also see more waste in those areas, and we also see a confusion on students' part about the number of folks who actually smoke on campus. So if they see a concentrated area of students smoking, they say, oh, everyone on campus does it, because they see this one group do it. And so they'll be more likely to initiate, which is another point of what we're trying to prevent with this. The second part is to make sure to hear everybody out. So schedule meetings with the different shared governance partners. So with the shared governance partners, staff unions, and other key bodies of support on the campus early. So have a chat with the president, have a chat with the unions, have a chat with human resources about what their policy is, the student government, kind of get an idea of how folks are feeling. You can't really prepare for an argument, or you can't really prepare to address concerns that someone has if you don't actually know what those concerns are. So it's important to really include them in those conversations. And also it kind of gets back to that idea of having someone feel isolated from the conversation and left out from the conversation. Folks are less likely to support you if they were not included in the initial conversation to start. So definitely hear everybody out from the get-go. And then also think about it as inside versus outside. So this is what I was kind of referring to earlier, of know who is considered to be part of that community and who are those key influencing factors on the campus. So if the president is a big figure on the campus, making sure that you have his support or their support, and making sure that they are feeling included in the conversation. If students tend to be a very key thing on the campus, and specifically student government is a key part of the campus, including them in the conversation. But on top of that is remembering, for a lot of us who are here from the different partnerships that are working with campuses, we might have our grants that allow us to work with campuses and such. Remembering that we are not immediately a part of their community. So if we come in and just straight out say, you need to go 100% smoke and tobacco free, that could be very aggressive and very offensive to the campus. That's not recognizing the work that they have done, and it can really start you off on a rough foot. Excuse me, 2 sessions in a row is starting to hit my throat. Whew, there we go. I swear, during Corona, I talk so much less in my life that now actually speaking. All right. So it's really an important aspect to make sure that you recognize the work that they have done. So starting off the conversations on those positives of recognizing who has been working on these policies before and what efforts that they have been making to make sure that everyone feels included in the conversation and they feel respected and acknowledged for the work that they've already done. The next part is something we were also referencing early on, is be clear. So be precise with what you are saying with your policy, with your signage, with your letters, with your scripts of presentations and such, making sure that what you are hoping to get out of these efforts are directly relatable to the campus, and they can understand that you're not coming in specifically to ostracize smokers, that you're not trying to upheave everything that they've done with their campus or make employees feel attacked for, or harm employees in some way for not allowing them to smoke on campus and such. And make sure that you get your materials and your content tested with the different students and other partners that are willing to work with you. So make sure that things are actually visually agreeable to that campus. So you can do things like use their campus colors, use their mascots if you have the ability to use that. If they have a huge squirrel population on their campus, use the squirrel to kind of emphasize some of the signage of making it like we're trying to go smoke and tobacco free to protect the squirrels and stuff like that. And make sure that when you are creating these policies, you're inclusive in the language of what tobacco products include, because tobacco products are constantly changing. So that's why when we've developed these policies of smoke and tobacco free, we've specifically emphasized anything that's created from a tobacco product or contains nicotine, aside from things that are regulated by the FDA for cessation. So making sure you are clear and direct in what you are saying. Okay. And then the next part is making sure that the culture matches what your campus really appreciates. So like I was saying before, using their campus colors, using their mascots, using recognizable taglines and images that they would associate with in your messaging and your presentations, just making it feel like it's theirs. And making sure to not exclude, if you're doing something at the district level, include some information from each of those campuses and include things that just make them feel connected. The more they feel like this belongs to them, the more likely they will be to actually buy in and participate. And keep positive. So we have a very common tendency, especially in tobacco control, to really focus on all of the parts that we know are scary about tobacco, the things about the lung damage and the long terms of addiction, the risk for long health issues and such like that. And we want to, a lot of times when we know there's a young adult who is using tobacco products, there is a common reaction amongst the field to just be like, want to shake them by their shoulders and be like, what are you doing? Why are you using this? This is so dangerous. And that doesn't work. We know that that doesn't work. We've seen it time and again that like all of us probably remember those commercials of like the person with the big hole in their neck and all those scare factors, and those don't work. So a lot of the times people who are using nicotine products and tobacco products know that they're addictive and they know that they're harmful. And once people who have been using it for a while, they're aware of what's going on that part, but it's still just very hard to quit. It's very hard to stop using it, and it's hard to go against what a lot of our friends and community are the perceived perception of use that's within that. So what we need to do is we need to redirect that conversation to something that they can latch onto and feel positive about. So instead of being 10% of your campus is smoking, changing it to 90% of the campus is having a clean air environment, or 90% of the campus has never used any kind of tobacco product. Focusing on things like building job prospects and making sure that they feel as though this is something they can do and this is something that's going to benefit them instead of something that we are telling them they're not allowed to do. We all have been young adults and teenagers, and we know that if your parents tell you you're not allowed to do this, then immediately you're going to want to do it. So it's kind of the same thing in our mentality of if we tell them you're not allowed to do this, then they're going to want to, like, they're not going to want to listen to us. A lot of people are stubborn. And so instead having it be, here's the benefits of not doing that, then they're making the conscious decision to do so themselves. And that feels theirs. And the last one I have for lessons learned is making sure to ask for help. So it's okay to say, I'm not sure, let me get back to you. If someone asks you for information that you're not sure of, don't make things up. Don't lie about stats or anything like that. Just be clear with them of, that's a really good point. Let me make sure to get you the correct information, and I will send it to you via an email, or I'll bring that information back to you in a couple of days. And that's what we are here for. That's what CYN is available for. We can help you with researching and finding answers to your questions. Chances are that other campuses across California have actually run into similar problems And we may actually have the ability to help you or connect you to somebody who has already been through what you're going through. So we have all the information. I provide technical assistance across the state of California. So I hear a lot of different things from a lot of different folks. And you'd be surprised how many conversations I have that end up being building off of each other. And so we have a lot of resources for you, and we are here to help for that. And the last thing I want to make sure you all know is that things are always changing. And you all are in this field because of the fact that you fit here. You have the ability to do this work. And I encourage you all to trust your gut. It doesn't matter if you started working on college policy yesterday or if you've been doing this for 25 years. You are here for a reason, and you are able to do this work. So make sure you ask for help. Stop and listen to or never stop listening to your community, making sure to identify what it is. We see new challenges all the time. So make sure that we all figure this out together, and you listen to your students and you listen to your staff and faculty about what it is that they need. And so with that, I wanted to make sure we had ample time for having conversations and really discussing all of this information. I know I just hit y'all with a ton really quickly. So feel free at this point, if you want to type your message, your questions in the chat, if you want to unmute yourself and ask any questions about this. I can provide you anything that, any information that I already have. And I can also set you up with making sure you get even more later if you have something really complex. Or share with each other too, because like I said, you all are working on this at the same time. How are y'all feeling? Anyone have a question, an idea, something that stuck out to you?
I have a question, Alex.
Yeah.
Earlier you were talking about the possible opposition from unions or the teacher unions. What would be some reasons for the unions to oppose, I guess, the attempt to make a campus 100% smoke free?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's actually something we run into relatively often from colleges. Of staff unions will be concerned of the potential harms to someone's job when they are like if they are a tobacco user. So a lot of times they're concerned of what would happen if this policy is passed and a staff member is seen on campus smoking. Are they going to be reported to HR? Is this going to be something that could affect their income? Is this something that could affect their like, are they going to get reprimanded or have something put in their record? And then there's also the concerns a lot of times that staff and faculty or staff won't have the ability to step away to have their smoke breaks in an efficient time. So if they work in the campus and they only get their 15-minute break, how can they leave campus to be able to smoke and then make it back? They're on there for 8-10 hours a day. So there's a lot of concern that this is going to cause harm to staff and it's not going to have enough benefit for students. The most common thing to kind of bring up for that is, so if you do get approached with that kind of argument, is to give information on the benefits to employees for having these smoke and tobacco free environments, and reminding them of how many different environments we have that are smoke and tobacco free, and which staff are able to have that support and have that ability to not use a nicotine product throughout. So at the K through 12 system, at hospitals, at all of these different workplaces. And so it's making sure that the staff feel supported and included in the conversation, making sure that they know that this is for their own lung health, this is for their own community health, their own environment, and then making sure that they have resources in case they need it. So if you can go through and get the funding and the grants to be able to have lozenges and gum and such, to be able to help them, not telling them, hey, you have to quit because of this policy, but instead having it be, we're going to help you be able to get through your 8-hour day. And then you can, when you leave campus, you can use your products. Like it doesn't have to be you can't ever use tobacco products again. It's more, you just can't use them here. And so getting them involved in that, getting those advocates on the union are really some of the best ways to get them engaged, and getting them feeling included in the conversation.
Alex, can I tack onto that real quick?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, Taylor.
Hi. So I went to a private college, so it's a little bit different than community college, but we had staff members who smoked on our task force. And so that was helpful as we were working on our policy to get their feedback on ways to include them in that conversation. And so we also had an email where they could send feedback anonymously or through whatever form that way if they didn't want to bring it up in person. And yes, we had pushback, but I think it was helpful having them in that conversation because once it came about, they were aware of it. They felt that they had their input as faculty on the task force, and we could kind of work it together when we were developing enforcement or how that worked for staff. They were totally involved from the start. So I think that is really helpful.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. And you have a session in second breakout, right? Today? Yeah. So Taylor is one of our students that, or she's not our student anymore. She's graduated and doing amazing work now. Well, she's always been doing amazing work, but she actually helped with Whittier College in the adoption of their smoke and tobacco-free policy. If you want to really hear really good stories, I really recommend at our next breakout, go and check out her session. She has a lot of fantastic on-the-ground information.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, gotta plug it.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been working. I'm a community engagement coordinator for a state London project. I've been working for about 2.5 years with 3 different colleges here in the Bay. And so I have like student coalitions that I work with. We're making some progress. One is at De Anza College right now. And so like, we just had, probably our like biggest win of, since I started this job recently, a couple of weeks ago, we got the Student Senate to pass a resolution in support of 100% smoking tobacco free, which is great. It's like the students that I work with are really leading it. And it's kind of interesting because one of the students that's one of our student leaders that's in our program is also an elected member of the Student Senate. So we kind of have an inside person. And the resolution they proposed was right now, we have it's like designated areas. And instead of the resolution being specifically about like just making it 100% smoke free, it was actually a little bit more specific in just saying a resolution to remove the smoking areas. And I'm just like wondering, so the other 2 colleges that I work with are Las Positas and Chabot. They're in a different district, and then De Anza's in the Foothill district. I don't have any connections at Foothill, and so I'm wondering, is it? It's kind of been, I feel like, I've been told this whole time that it has to go through the districts. We have to get support from Foothill as well. And I'm just a little bit unclear, is that actually true? Could a campus, are there ways that a campus could, regulate its own policy without the other campuses in its district doing the same thing? Could De Anza remove its smoking areas to effectively make it a smoke-free campus without getting Foothill to do the same?
So that really, that's an amazing question. And that's a really good example of some of the things we've run into. That really does depend on the language that they use and the approach in which you do that. I know that when it comes to the language you're using of removing designated smoking areas, that can go one of 2 ways really, of either making it so that you can really make a lot of progress on your own campus because of the fact that you're kind of more just taking areas off of the campus rather than changing the entire policy. And that also depends on if your policy specifically lists a certain number of designated smoking areas. So if you're just starting to wean off the number of smoking areas, that can really, you can really make that happen at your local level. However, you can also run into issues of some folks might try to take that language and being like, if you're getting rid of the designated smoking areas and you're not also saying that this is a smoke-free campus, smoke tobacco-free campus specifically, then that would mean that they would be able to smoke anywhere. Some students might misunderstand that particular language. So making sure to be specific with, like, just because the designated smoking areas are being removed doesn't mean that you can just smoke anywhere. This is still, there's no smoking on the campus. And the other aspect with that is, depending on your policy within your district. So I would really recommend looking at your district policy and double checking whether or not they give campus level control or district control. And that's something that you can usually find within your direct, like, it's listed in their board policy usually. And if it's not, then that's something you should double check in with, because it is completely possible to just have it be that you get it approved through your campus level, and then all the district has to do is say yes. Like, if they feel as though the campus level is fine, then you can have a board policy passed that just says De Anza College is smoke and tobacco free. So that's one of the ones where, like, that's the exception. It really depends on if it's given at local control or district control. And so just double checking with that. We also have some folks that have been working in the Foothill area that might be able to give you some resources for that kind of information. So send me an email and I can make those connections and make sure that you hear from folks to make sure that things are getting carried across. Yeah. Okay, awesome.
We have 2 more questions and 4 more minutes before this session has to end. So
cool. Perfect. Yeah, so I saw
we've got one from Roxanne.
Yes. How do you recommend engaging with these groups during virtual learning? We are having difficulty hearing back from people, as smoke-free campuses are not perceived as a priority within students physically on campus. That's a really good one. And the biggest argument that seems to be helpful with that is the concept of reopening smoke and tobacco free. So if you bring in the conversation of, we know that COVID is a respiratory illness. It is something that is hindered by weakened functions of the lungs. And we know that vaping and smoking causes weakened functions of the lungs. And actually can increase, not only increase the risk of having worsened symptom from COVID, but it can also increase the risk of spread of COVID because of the fact that if you think of the process of smoking, they're taking a deep breath in and a deep breath out without a mask on, which means that it is spreading the particles even further and can potentially increase that risk of spreading. So if you can bring in that conversation of encouraging campuses to go smoke and tobacco free when students are, by the time that students are coming on campus, that increases that protection for respiratory illnesses such as COVID. And that can really bring in that conversation, bring in that work. And then just keep reaching out to the offices, see if they'd be willing to set up a Zoom call with you, see if they'd be willing to just have a sit down, like a face-to-face conversation through a video. And a lot of the times, because folks are working virtually, we're all a little more starved for that interpersonal communication. So they'll be more willing to meet with you during this time. So definitely use that to your advantage. I got a personal message that, yes, this is being recorded and this will be sent out after the end of all of the sessions. So early March, you will get the recordings from this. Have you faced arguments that you are ostracizing students who are smokers? Yes, that is a very common argument we hear. I know I only have a minute left. So the biggest thing is making sure that students know this isn't about ostracizing students. This is about giving them the best opportunities for them to be able to gain careers and function well in their futures. So making sure that they can make it through an 8-hour workday without needing to take those smoke breaks. So even if it is them learning how to use lozenges or gum to get them through those longer periods of time, especially students who are working to become nurses or even folks who are in technical fields where they need to be able to work for longer hours without getting having this get in their way. We know that folks that are active nicotine users are actually have a harder time getting a job just after college than individuals who are not nicotine users. So this is all about trying to give folks their best chance to be able to get the jobs in the future. Yes, and then so We are now in the spot where we'll be wrapping up and the next session will be starting in about 5 minutes. I want to plug a couple that are, I mean, all of the sessions are amazing, but in case, so kind of bouncing off the conversation we were having in this session, if you're interested, there's going to be one that is specifically on the developing campus connections and such, which is going to be the Naomi, who's in our call right now, is mentioning it as well. That she works with Clovis and has really just had a lot of work recently that has moved forward with passing, or her college recently passed a new policy. So she can give a lot of insight for that. And then Taylor's going to be in, Taylor, the title of your session is?
Student engagement or something along those lines.
Yes. So it's engaging students. And so definitely check that one out as well. That works, I guess. So yes, I encourage you all, check out the different sessions, see what works for you. Everything that we have going on today is fantastic information. If you have more questions that I was not able to get to, I will, my email is just alex@cynonline.org. It's on the webpage. It's on a lot of the different information. I'll throw